much, Bo. Let's get started. So, yes, self-love. Last time we did a self-care webinar, and I was thinking, oh, what could be next? And I just thought, self-love. It's a little bit more deep. These are also the things that we're going to be talking about. We're not going to go super deep, but they might actually cause you to think about some things, about words. They might cause you to think about things, but so just be really soft with yourself throughout the webinar today, but also just this evening, or the rest of your day, wherever you are in the world. Yeah, that's all I will say just to begin with. Um, about me. Oh, oh my God, where am I? There we. Oh my gosh, sorry. Yes. About me. I'm Bella. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a consultant within neurodiversity, and I like to educate other people, businesses, communities about neurodiversity, the more kind of scientific aspect of neurodivergent identities and disabilities. I'm a yoga teacher. I teach in Copenhagen. I do inclusive yoga, so I do yoga for neurodivergent people. Um, and on the self-love note, I have a very rocky relationship with self-love. I started doing a lot of kind of content online about body positivity, and that was great. And then I got an autism diagnosis and an ADHD diagnosis in my early 20s, and that has really kind of affected the ways in which I saw self-love, or the ways in which I kind of had to have a dialogue with myself about different things, which we'll get to. Um, yeah, that's me. The agenda for today, love an agenda. We love minutes. We'll just talk about what embracing self-love means, especially within the neurodivergent lens. Some of the stages of self-love. So some of the kind of concrete moments or processes of what like a love journey could look like. And then also a little bit on the more social front, how to interact with others and friends, people with at work. What is self-love? What could how can we be practicing self-love with other people, and not? But I'll get to that. Actually, I just want to ask in the chat first to begin with, what does self-love mean for you? Do you have a specific definition of self-love? You could just write these in the chat. There's no specific timer on this, but if you could maybe start thinking about maybe what self-love means to you now versus in the beginning. Do you start thinking about, is it necessarily like body positivity? Is it, appearance, or is it something a little bit more internal? Please write in the chat below. Yes. Once these start kind of pouring in, um, there's I feel like there is within like society, or the way that we see self-love online, it's this kind of romantic aesthetic, right? It's like being the best version of yourself, and loving yourself all the time, no matter what. You may be thinking of, or there might be this idea of sisterhood, or being comfortable with yourself and frolicking in a field. I don't know. I just feel like whenever I thought about self-love before I even received this diagnosis, I had this romantic idea of being obsessed with yourself, and accepting yourself for everything. And I feel like for neurodivergent people, self-love looks a little bit different. So we live in a world made for neurotypical people. Therefore, us neurodivergent folk are often held to expectations that are meant for neurotypical people. And so, what I've experienced myself, but also speaking to other neurodivergent people, is that we are often super, super hard on ourselves because we feel like we have to perform to a standard, a neurotypical standard that is unattainable oftentimes, and oftentimes unsustainable as well. Um, so we're performing at a level, we're putting pressure on ourselves to perform at a level that we can't actually reach. Um, So the way I see it, and there's no universal definition of self-love for neurodivergent people, but my personal definition, which I'm sharing with you guys, is that practicing self-love through this lens of neurodiversity or as a neurodivergent person, it's embracing who we are, but and also without measuring ourselves to these external standards, these external expectations that weren't made for us in mind. It'll become a little bit more concrete when we go through. So there are three stages in my head um, of the journey with self love. We have unlearning, accepting, and nurturing. And these are not necessarily in order. We might be at a stage in some, for example, accepting our, let's say, our social, uh, our socialness as people. We might be more in the kind of accepting stage of like, okay, well, I'm okay with the fact that I have these social kind of arrangements and I don't feel bad about it. But maybe where it need to be we're at a stage of unlearning when we have certain expectations on ourselves for ourselves at work, for example. So this is not necessarily like a linear thing, but it's instead like a loop, always learning and always evolving about ourselves, if that makes sense. So I'm going to take them stage by stage. So with this unlearning is the messy and the hardest part, I would say, as part of this self-love journey, right? I've defined unlearning as this kind of we're realizing the expectations we have internalized about ourselves and actively challenging them. So if we could imagine, I love using metaphors, but like we have, if we're a plant and our roots are our upbringing, the ideas that we had, or the things that we were taught growing up, whether in school, whether culturally, whether with, informally through social media or with friends. Those are our roots. Those are the things that we are bound to. And a lot of these things that been taught are expectations or ideas about how things should be. Those things could sometimes be toxic and also very unattainable expectations for how we should be, if this all makes sense. And so unlearning is untangling the roots or removing the roots and trying to create new roots in light of accepting ourselves for who we are, for our neurodivergent brain. And it's hard. It's really, really, really hard. If I was to use like a metaphor, imagining these neurotypical expectations are like the square, okay? Expectations could be, for example, this idea we have to be in full-time employment, working a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, having a healthy lifestyle, exercising regularly and preparing our own meals, completing education, a full-time university education, holding eye contact when, yes, this is supposed to say no small talk when people are talking to you. Holding eye contact and having small talk when people are talking to you. Having a network of friends whom you regularly schedule plans with, cleaning your household without assistance. So these are all kind of things that we've passively, sometimes subconsciously learned that we're supposed to do, that we're supposed to achieve, right? Paying your bills all on time, things like that. Yeah, these are these expectations. Finding a partner, starting a family. And so that was the expectations, and this is more of a neurodivergent reality, which I've made a star because we're all stars. A reality could look like, and this could be you, this could be someone else, switching degrees multiple times. Yeah, taking supplementary high school classes to apply for a new degree, so not a linear career path. Working multiple jobs, having different side hustles so you can work, so you can rest when you need to. This is actually a very, I have a lot of friends, especially with ADHD, who have loads of different little jobs. I did and still do actually. I have like three different jobs in order for me to have that flexibility. Um, no interest of having a partner, but having a close friends online. This could be you, you know. Um, Someone who hates small talk but flaps when they speak or stims when something interests you. Yeah, spending free time working on crochet or knitting projects, um, and then having help with the kind of more practical household things. So when you compare the expectations and the reality, you can see that we are the star and the expectations are the box. We can't actually fit into it, and we never will. And we can't change. We could try and change our starness, our shapes, but that takes a lot of effort and work. And there's nothing for us. We don't need to change ourselves in order to fit these expectations. So unlearning is becoming aware of these expectations that we've internalized and realizing that we were never meant to fit into a neurotypical mold. The rules and the laws and the way that the world is built wasn't built with us in mind. So actually, there's a kind of a lot of peace in the fact that we were never meant to. It was not created for us. So why try and change ourselves and act and be and exist in the world in a way that wasn't meant with our brains in mind? So that was unlearning. Whew, that was a lot. Take a breath. I'm taking a breath. In fact, I'm going to take a sip of my special drink. It's Orangina, if anybody was wondering. Accepting. So, second stage. Accepting is learning to accept that our neurodivergent traits are not faults, but instead just who we are. I'll give you some concrete examples. So, here is a list of things that, or words, is it an adjective? Adjectives that I can think of when after I can think of that also apply to me, and that words that I've also kind of heard when I've been speaking to my neurodivergent friends that are used to that have been used to describe us either growing up or us now. Um, Sensitive is one that I have been heard that I heard so much growing up. I was such a sensitive child. I was also bossy, bossing people around. I was impulsive, still am. That's some. These are the kind of like narratives that we were told growing up. Maybe these don't actually apply to you. Maybe you had a different upbringing, but I'm just trying to think of things or that we a lot of neurodivergent people kind of get thrown at. And these are all kind of negatives, right? High maintenance. Oh my God, that is something that I've been described to about so many times. So we have all these words, and in a way, we're kind of it's this is kind of the word sensitive or the word these narratives are described or they're these negative things that we've been told about our behaviors are seen as like a deficit or something less than of a neurotypical way of existing in the world. So if we take something like being described as sensitive, and we actually flip it on its side, and we remove this neurotypical way of looking at it, you can actually see that we being sensitive can actually be seen as being empathetic. Being impulsive could be seen as decisiveness. Being called bossy actually is, you could also be described as proactive. So really it's kind of this acceptance stage is about reframing the ways in which we were told, the things that we were told growing up or even now, into a more neutral slash positive thing, if that makes sense. It also goes into the whole social and medical model of disability, which I won't go into now. But we have to reframe and remove this neurotypical way of looking at ourselves and our behavior, and seeing actually There's nothing wrong with how I'm acting. It's just the people and the surroundings and the culture that I grew up with, and also the world that I'm living in now, that is choosing to see it as a bad thing. So this is actually something that I've taken from my own life. Um, I go, I'm very, very hard on myself for ordering food and takeout because I find making food for myself really hard. So yeah, so I order takeout a lot. And so I feel a lot of shame for being lazy. So I call myself lazy, right? Um, this word lazy is a kind of a fault, something that I've internalized somewhere along the line because I've been taught to that to be a real adult, we have to be preparing meals every single day, which is insane. Like, oh my God, it's so much effort and energy to like have to be preparing food and like buying food and groceries when you have a job. Like, how does anyone even deal with it? Anyway, so yes, I've internalized a lot of shame and feel a lot of lazy. I feel that I'm lazy because of my takeout habit or whatever. But if we instead reframing, removing this lens, we can just scratch the whole I'm lazy part and instead look at the fact. The fact is that I find it hard to make food for myself. Therefore, I order takeout a lot. You know, maybe economically is another story, but we're not looking at money or the finances. But it's just I find it hard, and that's okay because that's who I am. Yeah, that's what I will say for that. So not seeing ourselves as faults or our behaviors as faults, but just facts, neutralizing it. Um, yeah, that's what I would say. Third part, nurturing. This is kind of more the fun part. And this is where we're going to get a little bit more interactive. So after the messy work of unlearning and accepting, it was very messy indeed. Nurturing is all about being curious of who we are and what makes us us. So something actually that I also talked a little bit about in the self-care um, webinar was the because we're living up to or we're trying to live up to these neurotypical expectations, we mask our a lot of our actual selves in the world, whether in interactions at work or whatever, or with people, new people, family. That's a big one. And so, with a consequence of this masking, a lot of the time is that we sometimes lose touch with who we are, um, what we actually like, what are our passions. Um, when we've been, when a lot of us have been masking for a long time, it sometimes can feel like we can feel a little bit empty, like when we don't have to mask. And it's like, okay, but what do I actually like? Who really am I? What do I? Why am I here? You know, why am I on this earth? Right? It gets a little bit deep. Um, we won't go into the more philosophical. We're going to keep it light and fun. Um, so light and fun means reflections. So get your notepad out / write in the chat. Here's the question for you guys. Think about a time you were really proud of yourself. What did you do? How did you feel? And this doesn't necessarily need to be something that you received praise for. Very important. Um, whether you want to write this in the chat, I think we'll have 4 minutes for this. Or you want to write this on a notepad or take a picture of this and then journal about this later or whatever. Yeah, thinking about a time you were really proud of yourself. And then also the follow-up questions, why were you proud of yourself? Is it because you learned something about yourself? Is it because you worked really hard? Share it in the chat if you're comfortable. 4 minutes.
Start that timer. I'll start that timer on my side. Perfect.
Also, I will just say that we only have a little bit of time to kind of share or reflect. But if you have any other reflections throughout this um, presentation, like please feel free. Like there's no real you can share whenever. It's a bit of a pressure cooker situation. um, yeah, so don't feel pressured to bring your thoughts into a sentence just right now. I just thought I'd mention that. Okay, it seems we're done. I've been actually reading a little bit in the chat, and it's so nice. Thank you to everyone who shared. Um, Again, no pressure to share. It's also kind of a deep question because pride is such a yeah. Being proud of yourself. It doesn't have to be like the biggest thing. Actually, I was talking to you both about this the other day that I I when I got my bachelor's degree, it was a really big moment for me. But I it wasn't like the most proud I've ever been of myself. And everybody was like, "Oh my God, well done! Like you've got a degree, like and it's a big deal to get a degree." But I didn't have that yes, like pride because for me it didn't really necessarily mean as much to me getting a degree than let's say doing my yoga training, which was 3 weeks versus 4 years. But it's because I was more proud of myself with the yoga training was because I put myself in a really vulnerable situation for 3 weeks and committed to something that I never thought I was able to do. School for me has always been really, not really, but pretty easy, right? So it is a really personal thing. And that actually leads on to, let me see if I can change. Yes, actually, I'll go back to that thought, scratch that thought. But the point is for this next section is that doing this nurturing work, figuring out ourselves can be quite confusing. We might be like, oh my gosh, what do I actually like? Who am I? What actually makes me proud of myself? So it can lead us to being really, really kind of confused, especially as like late diagnosed neurodivergent people. In my experience, it's this kind of feeling of, oh my God, who am I? Yeah. And then this is like the sometimes it can be a little bit, yeah, you're feeling like you're just want to crawl up in a ball like that, right? So there's the question of, is this important to me or is this something that I've been taught to value? Do I like this sport? Do I like going to volleyball? Or is it because I was made to go to volleyball every week? um, and I needed, I had this kind of urge to fit in or be liked within a group. Do I even like those people? Do they bring me joy? Do I like school, or is it because I was praised for being so smart growing up? Maybe I'm projecting a little bit in that slide. Um, so it comes down to when we're working out who we really are, this kind of deep, meaningful work. What are our values? What are the things that make us us? And what's important to us? When we understand our values, we can make choices which align with what we actually want, not necessarily what we feel we should want. Um, I love Brene Brown. Very basic, I know. No, it's not basic. She's amazing. And she has a list of values. This is also on her website. Maybe we spend 1 minute. You can always come back to this slide or either going onto her website. Try to pick 3 values that best encapsulate you, your interests, who you are. Just 3, and it's really hard. I know for 3. Let's do 1 minute on that. And if you want to share in the chat, I would be super curious to hear what you guys picked. Yeah, 1 minute. There's so many to choose. I know. Okay, so don't worry if you haven't been able to pick 3. This was just an example little thing, just to start us thinking about this values exercise, right? Um, and so when we have these values, or we have an idea of these values, we can start kind of thinking about living our lives based on what matters to us, embodying our values. So this is just a few little ideas. Let's say you have a value like nature. Um, Ideas on how to embrace it could be spending evenings volunteering at your local pet adoption place, taking long weekends to go hiking, teaching other friends about your favorite mushroom species. These things are not obligations. These are not things, okay, well, oh, I have chosen nature. That means I have to, read an encyclopedia about these, about my favorite bird species. It's things that make sense to you, um, and according to your energy. We do not need to be putting more expectations and pressure on ourselves more than what we already have, right? But these are just kind of ideas on how we can actually infuse some meaning and purpose in our day-to-day lives based on the things that matter to us, right? I'll do an example, not just to talk about myself, but this is something maybe you could do at home. So my values are knowledge, authenticity, and comfort. I'm actually a little bit up in the air about authenticity, but yeah, these are my current values. For example, I love to make spreadsheets. I don't know if I've mentioned, but I like to make spreadsheets about my favorite Ritter Sport flavors. It's a whole thing. I'll share if you want in the chat the link to that spreadsheet. Taking multiple yoga trainings and also becoming a sauna goose master. Sauna is one of my biggest hobbies slash special interests. That actually a couple months ago I took a course to become a guy who I'm the person waving the towel in a sauna, and that was just a whole day, and that was just for my own fun. Yeah. Comfort. I love to have a little lavender pouch in my bag to just sniff. It's also when I'm overstimulated, mostly on public transport. Um, I yeah, love to buy the same t-shirt because I like the fabric. It's mostly cotton things. I'm very particular about, my bed linen and everything. So yeah, I wear the same clothes pretty much every day, but they're just different versions of the same style, if that makes sense. Yeah, love wearing clogs. And I'm never gonna not wear clogs. I don't care if people think they're ugly. Also, Ugg boots. Love wearing Ugg boots. My boyfriend is like, they're really ugly. I'm like, I actually don't care. I'm not wearing these for you. I'm wearing them because I feel really comfortable right now and cozy. Yeah, and also not drinking as much as I used to. That's a whole other thing which I won't go into. But drinking doesn't make me comfortable. The day off and the day after. So, and I will no longer, or I'll try not to put myself with peer pressure for that one. Yeah, authenticity, being dry, and not necessarily making other people feel comfortable about how I communicate. Yeah, and wearing Moomin socks again with the clogs. um, I love Moomins, and Moomin socks make me feel really happy. Whenever I look down at my feet, I can see little Moomins on my feet, and that makes me really happy. And these are just like little things, right? You don't necessarily need to go on a excavation somewhere to embody your values. These are just like tiny little meaningful little things that you can put in your day which make you happy. It's like a little fun exercise for you to do. So I really really encourage you guys to kind of yeah think about this. um and so when we're put in the situation of being asked to go to an event, go to a party, um and you're a bit like do I want to go? Is this me? What do I actually feel about this? What do I feel about this set of people? You could ask yourself, does this activity align with my values? Um, Very formally written there. Does this kind of, your values are there to anchor you, to remind you, is this me? For me, drinking, going out on the town, it's not really me. It is great if it's you, but it's not. And not to shame anyone who does or shame the person who's asked me, but I'd rather spend time with that person in another way. Um, am I wanting to go to this event because I actually want to, or is it because of a formal obligation or maybe even peer pressure? Um, and also, what I really like to do is, let's say I've been to this event before, or a similar one. Think about back to the time how I felt afterwards, or if it's a certain group of people, how did I feel afterwards? Was I really empowered and was I really like, yes, this was really fun. We should do this again, or was I completely drained socially, emotionally, physically? Um, yeah, and maybe you went to that event and maybe you learned something new about yourself, either socially or like, theoretically something practical. These are just some like overviews of things that you can kind of think about when deciding or not you want to go to a thing. Um, yeah, and this is one of my icons, and I thought it was really kind of relevant to put in here. This woman is called, I don't actually know her name. Her name is, but her title is the Green Lady of Brooklyn. And she wears exclusively green. And in an interview, she was asked, "Do you wear a different color every day?" And she said, "No, I used to go through different stages, but then I found that I was happiest when I was green. So I've been green for 15 years." Which I think is really, really cool. She's identified that green makes her happy, and that's exclusively what she she wears. Um, but also to make the point that, if you look, this is her house here. Her walls aren't green, her cupboards aren't green, her table isn't green. It's just these little things. So it's actually a good metaphor for the fact that, you embodying your values doesn't necessarily need to be, a chore of painting your house green. It could just be like the next time you buy something, maybe make it with your favorite cartoon. Or if you have a lunchbox, make it, get a, a fun lunchbox, which is, that makes you happy and makes you smile in the morning when you're making your lunch. Little things. Yeah, I don't think she's actually neurodivergent. I mean, I don't know if she's been asked. I don't know if she's unpressed, but I just think she's a kind of a baddie. And I think the world would be much better if there were more people like her in it. So yeah. um, yes, this last section is more of the kind of emotional labor kind of conversation about expressing your self-love and protecting yourself. So picking your battles and how to protect your peace. This is something I deal with so much. Um, so it takes a lot of time to be yourself and talk about your needs to new people. Um, Introducing yourself to a new group of friends who don't know you. Maybe you're not openly out as uh, having being neurodivergent. And that's a lot of kind of time to kind of trust people and know that they will be there. They know who you are and your magic that you have. And also, we will always, unfortunately, come across people who will make assumptions about us and, kind of dig into our neurodivergent traits and be like, why is it that you do that? And you might explain to them, oh, it's because I'm XYZ, or it's because it makes me happy. And they're not always gonna be wanting to listen to our response. They'll be we'll come across a lot of people who are just saying, oh, you're doing that and you're different because you're different. And that's weird. And it's not a productive conversation, right? Um, so that's something to, bear in mind. So the way I see it is that the key of working out whether it's worth spending your energy and your time explaining yourself or explaining something that you do. The important thing is your relationship to this person, right? That's asking into this. Um, how did you meet? Is it a boss? Is it a colleague? Is it someone at school that you don't know? Or is it, a friend or family member who's genuinely curious? Yeah, what kind of relationship do you have to this person? And this is a really big one. Are they likely to change their mind after you've spent energy on them? Is your time and energy going going into explaining yourself? Is it gonna change the way they see you, or is it gonna, you know, are they gonna start acting differently now? Will they be grateful for the fact that you've used emotional labor on them? That's up for you to kind of predict, depending on the person, right? So I present to you a scenario. Um, you're at work and you're using a STEM toy at your desk, as you can see here. A coworker, the one that loves to comment on everything, comes by and says they've never seen children's toys in the workplace. What do you do? Um, this also could be a scenario like, for example, if it's kind of with that, you know, as if you're asking a person of color, where are you really from? These are the scenarios where you're having to explain your identity or explain yourself as a marginalized person. Also with people who have different, uh, yeah, gender expressions or gender identities, where as marginalized people, we're often put in the in the question seat by the majority, having to defend or explain or even translate ourselves, right? So this scenario is just kind of an example. Um, so things to consider. So if you're trying to work out whether you or not you should spend emotional energy of time explaining yourself, think about number one, the person. Is this someone that you want to get to know? Number two, energy. How much energy and time will it take for me to explain this? Do you have to properly, also like to do with executive functioning? Like, how much energy will this take for you to be like, I am autistic and I use a STEM toy because it self-regulates? Do you know what I mean? Do you have a script ready and you're just ready to throw it out? Do you know, it's that kind of thing, right? Maybe it also depends on the day. Today, if someone had asked me that, Actually, no, I work at a really cool workplace, but I would have just been like, no, I can't do this today because I've started my period. So yeah. And also the third thing, identity. How important is it to me that this person understands part of who I am? I think that's a really important one because, you know, there will be there will always be people in this world, and I've learned this at 26 years old. There will always be people that won't understand you, and there will always be people who won't understand you and won't want to. And that sucks, but also it sucks for them, and it's their loss, right? Um, it kind of follows into this next point of sometimes the biggest act of self love is not taking all of the battles. Um, Being really mindful of your personal energy and creating boundaries with people. Um, Growing up, especially as a teenager, I feel like I was going to war every single day trying to explain myself, why I do things, why I look the way I look. I grew up as like a mixed race teenager in like a predominantly white school. And I felt like I was having to, yeah, fight everyone all the time. And actually, I could have just not and not explain and just let things be. I know not everyone has the. It's also to do with privilege and positioning, but for me, that is actually a really big thing of self love. Is valuing your energy, and choosing to say actually no, you're not worthy of me explaining myself, or it's this fight is not worthy of my energy. Um, and you have this is just like a general thing. Like you have so much magic in you. You are so unique. You are so awesome. Not to do the whole like your neurodiversity is your superpower thing. That's not a discourse that I kind of like to go into. But yeah, I it's more of a you have so much to give the world. So be really, really sparing with who you use it with. Um, don't pour from an empty cup. Be very mindful, very demure, whoa, of who you're sharing with, and the people that you choose to let into your life. Um, and lucky for them, because yeah, they're gonna be benefiting from spending time with you, right? So to round off, the overall takeaway for this self love and the self love journey in general. Oh, um, take it easy on yourself. It's not something that's linear. It's something that develops throughout time. Um, and yeah, that's what I would say for that. I can't think of anything more kind of motivational to say, other than just like be really easy on yourself. We talked also a lot about a lot of different things today. So don't go home and be like, oh my God, I have so much work to do on myself. It's not like that. It's more like little steps, right? Yeah, that's all I'll say before I talk more.
Ah, amazing. Ah, that's so good.